I still see the metal shavings on my fingers sometimes. Not really there, of course, just the memory of them. Cold, sharp little curls of steel that stuck to my skin while I worked in that basement in St. Lô, summer of '44. I was 20 years old, and I was doing something that could have gotten me court-martialed, maybe even shot. But I did it anyway because the alternative was watching more of my friends die with jammed rifles in their hands. We'd been in France for 6 weeks by then. The brass kept telling us our M1 Garands were the finest infantry rifles ever made. Maybe they were, back in the States, on clean shooting ranges with proper maintenance. But in Normandy, in the mud and the rain and the dust that got into everything, they jammed. Not sometimes, often. You'd squeeze the trigger and nothing. You'd work the bolt and it'd stick halfway. And while you're standing there trying to clear it, well, that's when you stop being a soldier and become a statistic. I lost my friend Tommy Gossetti that way, July 3rd. We were clearing a hedgerow outside Carentan. He went around the corner first, saw 3 German soldiers about 15 yards out, raised his rifle. I heard the click from where I was standing, not the bang, the click. He looked down at his weapon for maybe half a second. That was all the time they needed. I pulled him back around the corner, but he was already gone. His rifle had 3 rounds still in it. The firing pin had broken. 3rd one that week in our platoon alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that sound. That empty click that meant Tommy didn't get to go home to his wife in Pittsburgh. She was pregnant. He'd shown me the letter a dozen times. I decided right then I wasn't going to let another man die because his weapon quit on him. I just didn't know what I was going to do about it. Our squad got rotated back to St. Lô for 3 days rest. The town was mostly rubble by then, but there were still some buildings standing. I found a basement in what used to be a machine shop. The owner was dead, probably. Most of the civilians were either dead or gone, but his tools were still there. A lathe, drill press, files, measuring instruments. And in the corner, covered in dust and broken plaster, was something I recognized from my uncle's farm back in Ohio. A Browning automatic rifle, bar. Broken, of course, stock split, barrel bent. But the receiver was intact. I'd grown up around machines. My father worked at a factory in Cleveland making engine parts. Taught me how metal works, how pieces fit together, how tolerances matter. I'd spent summers at my uncle's place learning how firearms operated. Not because I wanted to be a soldier, just because a farm kid needed to know how to fix things when they broke. I stood there in that basement looking at that broken bar, and I started thinking about the M1s we were carrying, about firing pins that snapped, about extractors that wore out, about springs that lost tension in the mud. And I thought about something else, something I'd read about once in a mechanics magazine before the war. The Germans had figured out how to modify their rifles to fire faster. Not quite automatic, but close. Bump firing, some called it. It wasn't legal, even for them, officially, but they did it anyway when they needed to. And I thought, if I could figure out how to make our M1s more reliable and give them a faster rate of fire, maybe fewer men would end up like Tommy. The problem was everything I was thinking about was illegal under US military code. You didn't modify your service weapon. You definitely didn't convert a semi-automatic rifle into something that could fire like an automatic. That was the kind of thing that got you sent to Leavenworth, or worse. But I kept seeing Tommy's face, kept hearing that click, so I decided I didn't care about the regulations. I cared about the men I was serving with. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I started with the broken bar, took it apart completely, studied how the automatic firing mechanism worked, the sear, the disconnector, the hammer assembly. Then I took apart my own M1 and laid all the pieces out on an old workbench. The engineering was different, but the principle was the same. Both rifles used gas operation. Both had similar hammer and trigger groups. The M1 was designed to fire 1 shot per trigger pull, but if you modified the sear engagement and adjusted the hammer spring tension, and if you were very careful about the timing, you could make it fire repeatedly as long as you held the trigger back. It took me 2 days. I barely slept. Just worked in that basement by candlelight, filing down parts, measuring tolerances with calipers I found in the shop, testing the action over and over without ammunition. The hard part wasn't making it fire automatically. That was relatively simple if you didn't care about safety or reliability. The hard part was making it work without blowing up in someone's hands or jamming worse than before. I strengthened the extractor using a spring from the bar. replaced my firing pin with one I machined from a piece of hardened steel I found in the shop, making it thicker, less likely to snap. Modified the gas system to reduce fouling. And then, the illegal part, I altered the sear so that it wouldn't catch after the first round unless you released the trigger completely. It wasn't true automatic fire, it was something in between. Fast, controlled bursts if you knew how to use it. Maybe 4 or 5 rounds per second instead of the normal 1 or 2. I tested it in the basement with dummy rounds I'd pulled apart and emptied. Worked the action 1,000 times. It felt solid, smooth, better than it had before. But I wouldn't know if it really worked until I fired it with live ammunition. And I couldn't do that anywhere near the base without someone hearing and asking questions I didn't want to answer. On our last night before heading back to the line, I took my modified rifle and 6 clips of ammunition and walked about 2 miles outside town to an abandoned farm. There was a collapsed barn there that would muffle the sound at least a little. I set up some old fence posts as targets. My hands were shaking, not from fear of the rifle, from fear of what I'd done, what I was about to prove worked or didn't work. I loaded a clip, 8 rounds, took aim at the nearest post, maybe 30 yards out, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked once, twice, 3 times, 4. I let go of the trigger and it stopped, exactly like I designed it. I squeezed again. Another burst. The fence post splintered and fell. The rifle hadn't jammed, hadn't exploded. The modified firing pin held. The extractor worked. Everything worked. I fired all 48 rounds, not a single malfunction. The barrel got hot, hotter than it would with normal semi-automatic fire, but not dangerously so. The accuracy was acceptable at short range, which was all that mattered in hedgerow fighting. And the rate of fire was enough to make a real difference if you got caught by surprise. I sat down in the dirt next to that barn, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before Normandy. Hope. Maybe this would help. Maybe this would save somebody. But I also felt something else. Guilt. Because I knew what I'd done was illegal. I knew if anyone found out, I'd be finished. And I knew that if I was going to make this work, if I was going to make a difference, I couldn't just modify my own rifle. I'd have to modify others, a lot of others. And I'd have to do it without anyone in command finding out. I got back to base just before dawn, cleaned my rifle until it looked normal, hid the tools I'd taken from the machine shop in my pack, and when we shipped out that morning back to the front, I didn't say anything to anyone. Just carried my modified M1 and waited for a chance to see if it would really make a difference in combat. That chance came 4 days later. We were pushing through a series of small villages east of St. Lo. The Germans were pulling back, but they'd left behind stay-behind units, snipers, machine gun nests, small groups of soldiers with orders to delay us as long as possible. We'd been taking casualties all morning, not heavy, but steady. 1 man here, 2 men there. It adds up. Around noon, my squad was moving through an orchard. Apple trees, all of them damaged by shelling. The ground was soft from rain. We were spread out, maybe 10 yards between each man. I was third in line. Corporal Davidson was up front. Good man, careful. He raised his fist and we all stopped. He'd seen something. I couldn't tell what. Then the shooting started. They'd been waiting in a drainage ditch about 40 yards ahead. Maybe 8 or 9 German soldiers with 2 MG-42 machine guns. They opened up all at once. Corporal Davidson went down in the first burst. The man behind him, Peters, got hit trying to run back. The rest of us hit the dirt and tried to return fire. But we were in the open and they were dug in. Bad situation. The kind where you either get very lucky or you don't make it. I could hear our rifles firing. Single shots, measured, disciplined, exactly like we'd been trained. But we weren't hitting anything and they were pouring fire at us. I could see the traces from the MG-42s cutting through the air about 2 feet above my head. Someone screamed. I think it was Miller. Then the scream stopped. I pressed myself into the dirt as flat as I could, and I thought, this is it. This is where it ends. But then I remembered what was in my hands. Not a standard M1, something different, something I'd built. I didn't think about the regulations, didn't think about court-martials. I thought about Tommy and Corporal Davidson and Peters and Miller. I rolled onto my side, found the drainage ditch through the trees, and I squeezed the trigger and held it. The rifle hammered against my shoulder. 4 rounds, 5, 6. I let go, adjusted my aim, squeezed again. Another burst. I wasn't trying to be accurate, I was trying to suppress them, make them put their heads down, give my squad a chance to move. It worked. One of the MG-42s stopped firing. I heard yelling in German. I reloaded, fired another burst at where I thought they were, then another. Someone next to me, I think it was Jackson, shouted something I couldn't hear over the noise, but I saw him get up and run forward to a better position. Then another man moved, then another. We were advancing. I kept firing in short bursts, keeping that ditch suppressed. My rifle was getting hot. I could feel it through the handguard, but it wasn't jamming. Every time I pulled the trigger, it fired. Every time I released it, it stopped, exactly like it was supposed to. We overran the position in maybe 3 minutes. The Germans either pulled back or died trying. I don't know which, and I didn't look too close. We'd lost 3 men. Corporal Davidson was dead. Peters was dead. Miller was hit bad but alive. If I'd been firing a normal M1, if we'd all been firing normal rifles, I think all of us would have died in that orchard. But we didn't, because my rifle worked different. Because I'd broken the rules. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. After that fight, Jackson came up to me. He was bleeding from a cut on his face from a tree splinter, but he was grinning. He said, "Lawson, what the hell kind of rifle you got there? That thing was singing." I told him it was just an M1 like everyone else's. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Yeah, sure it is." But he didn't push it. Not then. That night, back at the company position, word got around. Guys started asking me about my rifle, about what I'd done to it. I kept denying it at first, said they were imagining things, said the stress of combat makes you see things different. But they weren't stupid. They knew what they'd heard. And more than that, they'd noticed something else. My rifle hadn't jammed, not once. While half the squad had been fighting with weapons that failed at least once during the firefight. A private named Coleman pulled me aside. Young kid, maybe 18. He'd been in country for 2 weeks. His rifle had jammed twice that day, and he was terrified. He asked me straight out if I'd modified my weapon. I looked at him, looked at his scared eyes, thought about lying, but I didn't. I told him yes. I told him what I'd done, and I told him I could do it to his rifle too if he wanted. If he was willing to take the risk. He said yes without hesitating. So did Jackson when I asked him. So did 5 other men in the squad. By the end of the week, I'd modified 9 rifles total. I'd sneak away at night, find a quiet spot, and work by flashlight. File the sears, strengthen the firing pins, adjust the gas systems. Each one took about 3 hours. I barely slept, but I didn't care, because those rifles worked, and the men carrying them stopped dying from weapon malfunctions. We kept it quiet, didn't talk about it where anyone outside the squad could hear. When we fired our weapons, we tried to keep it to single shots if there were officers around. But in combat, when it mattered, we'd let them run, and it made a difference. We could suppress enemy positions faster, react quicker to ambushes, put more rounds down range when we needed to. Our casualty rate dropped, not to 0. Men still died, but fewer, and almost none from jammed weapons. By August, word had spread to other squads in the platoon, then to other platoons in the company. Men I didn't even know would approach me quietly and ask if the rumors were true. If I was the guy who could fix rifles. I'd always ask them why they wanted to know. And they'd always have the same answer. They'd lost someone to a weapon malfunction, or they'd nearly died themselves when their rifle quit, and they didn't want it to happen again. I modified 43 rifles over the next 2 months, 43 illegal weapons, each one a court-martial waiting to happen. I kept a count in my head, not because I was proud, because I was terrified. Terrified that someone in command would notice, that someone would inspect the rifles too closely, that I'd be found out. But I kept doing it anyway, because every rifle I modified was one less failure, one less click instead of a bang, one less Tommy Garcetti. The closest I came to getting caught was in September. We'd taken a town called Nancy. Our company was in reserve, resting. A captain from division headquarters showed up to inspect equipment. He was going rifle by rifle, checking serial numbers, looking at condition. My stomach dropped. The modifications I'd made were internal mostly. But if he field stripped one of the rifles, if he looked close at the trigger group, he'd see it, and it would all be over. He got to Jackson first. Looked at the rifle, worked the action, asked Jackson how it was performing. Jackson said, "Fine, sir, no problems." The captain nodded and moved on. Then Coleman, same thing. Then he got to me, took my rifle. I could feel sweat running down my back even though it was cold that day. He looked at the receiver, checked the barrel, worked the bolt. It felt like an hour, but it was probably 30 seconds. Then he handed it back to me and said, keep it clean, Private, and moved on to the next man. I found out later he'd been sent because Division had received reports of unauthorized weapon modifications in several units. They were looking for evidence, but either he didn't know what to look for, or he didn't look hard enough, or maybe he just didn't care. We never found out. He filed a report saying all weapons were in proper order and we never heard about it again. But it shook me, made me realize how close we were to disaster. I thought about stopping, about putting the rifles back to standard. But then we got orders to push into the Siegfried line, and I knew I couldn't. The fighting there was going to be brutal. Every advantage mattered. So I kept the rifles modified, kept the secret, and kept waiting for the moment when it would all come crashing down. That moment never came. Not the way I expected. What came instead was the winter, December 1944. We were in Belgium when the Germans launched their offensive. The Battle of the Bulge, they call it now. We called it hell. Coldest winter in decades, snow up to your knees, supplies cut off, surrounded, and the Germans coming at us with everything they had left. Our company got trapped near a town called Bastogne. We were dug in on a hillside with maybe 60 men left from the original 140. No food, low on ammunition, freezing. The Germans attacked 3 times in 2 days. We held them off each time, but just barely. The modified rifles made a difference. When they came at us in waves, we could put up enough fire to break their attacks. Not because we were better soldiers, because our weapons didn't quit on us. On the 3rd day, we were down to maybe 30 men still able to fight. I'd been hit by shrapnel in my left arm, but it wasn't bad enough to take me out of the line. We were rationing ammunition, 5 rounds per man for the next attack. That was all we had left. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where we make our stand, and probably die. The modified rifles didn't matter anymore if we didn't have bullets to put through them. Then we heard engines, tanks. I thought they were German. We all did. Got ready to die fighting, but they came from the wrong direction, from behind us. American tanks, Patton's Third Army. They'd broken through. We were relieved. I sat down in my foxhole and I cried. Not ashamed to say it. I cried because we were alive and I hadn't thought we would be. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. After the Bulge, the war changed. We were pushing east now, into Germany itself. The Germans were falling back but fighting hard for every mile. We crossed the Rhine in March of '45. By then, I'd stopped modifying rifles. Not because I'd changed my mind about it, because I was too tired. We all were, just trying to survive each day. Put one foot in front of the other. Make it to the next town, the next river, the next objective. I remember the day the war ended, May 8th. We were in a town somewhere in Bavaria. Can't remember the name. Someone came running through the streets yelling that Germany had surrendered. It was over. We'd won. Men were cheering, hugging each other, crying. I just sat there on the steps of a bombed-out building and felt nothing. Not happy, not sad, just empty. Like I'd used up everything inside me and there was nothing left. We stayed in Germany for occupation duty, boring work mostly, guard duty, patrols, waiting to go home. I started thinking about what I'd done during the war, the rifles I'd modified, the laws I'd broken. I'd never told any officer, never filed a report, never admitted anything officially. As far as the army was concerned, I was just another infantry private who'd done his job and survived. But I knew, and so did the 43 men whose rifles I'd changed. We had an understanding. We didn't talk about it. We just knew. Some of those men came to me before we shipped home and thanked me, said I'd saved their lives. Maybe I had, maybe I hadn't. There's no way to know for sure, but I think about it, even now. 79 years later, I think about it. I got discharged in November of '45, came home to Cleveland, went back to work at my father's factory, tried to forget. But you don't forget things like that. You carry them. The men you lost, the men you saved, the laws you broke, the choices you made, all of it stays with you. I never told anyone about the rifles for 50 years. Not my wife, not my kids, not my friends. It was just something I kept to myself. A secret from a war that had a lot of secrets. But in 1995, I got a letter from a man named Coleman, the same private whose rifle I'd modified first. He'd found my address somehow, wrote to tell me he was dying, cancer, and he wanted me to know that he'd lived 50 good years because of what I'd done in that orchard outside St. Lo. He had children, grandchildren, a life, and he wanted to say thank you. I wrote him back. Told him he didn't need to thank me, that I'd done what anyone would have done. But that wasn't true, and we both knew it. Not anyone would have done it. Most soldiers followed the rules, followed orders. I'd broken the rules because I thought the rules were going to get people killed. And maybe I was right, or maybe I just got lucky and nobody died because of my modifications instead of being saved by them. Coleman died 2 months after he sent me that letter. I went to his funeral, met his family. His granddaughter came up to me and said, "You're the man from the war. Grandpa talked about you." I didn't know what to say, just nodded. What do you say to that? How do you explain that you broke military law 43 times because you were angry and scared and didn't want to watch any more friends die? After Coleman's funeral, I started getting more letters from other men whose rifles I'd modified. Some of them just wanted to reconnect. Others wanted to tell me their stories. What happened to them after the war, how they'd lived. A few of them asked me if I ever regretted what I'd done, if I ever worried about getting caught, even after all those years. Honestly, I didn't know how to answer that. Regret is complicated. Would I do it again? Yes. Was it the right thing to do? I still don't know. The thing about war is that right and wrong get blurry. You make decisions in seconds that you spend decades thinking about. I modified those rifles because I believed it would save lives. It probably did. But it also could have gotten me and everyone involved sent to prison. Could have ended differently in a dozen ways. I got lucky, that's all. Lucky that no one looked too close. Lucky that the rifles worked. Lucky that the war ended before my luck ran out. I'm 92 years old now. Most of the men who were there are gone. Jackson died in 2008. The last time I talked to him, he told me he still had the rifle. He'd kept it all those years, brought it home from Germany in his duffel bag, never fired it again. Just kept it in his closet as a reminder. When he died, his son found it and turned it in during a gun buyback program. Probably got melted down. End of the story. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if someone had found out during the war. If that captain in Nancy had looked closer. If one of the rifles had malfunctioned and hurt someone. If word had reached the wrong officer. My life would be completely different. Prison probably. Dishonorable discharge. My family would have carried that shame. All because I thought I knew better than the regulations. But then I think about the men who came home. Coleman with his 50 years and his grandchildren. Jackson with his long life. The others whose names I still remember. And I think maybe it was worth the risk. Maybe sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. Or maybe I'm just an old man trying to justify something I did when I was 20 years old and scared and angry. I've never told this story publicly before, never written it down, never admitted it officially. The statute of limitations has long since passed. I can't be prosecuted now. Most of the evidence is gone. The rifles destroyed or lost, the witnesses dead. It's just me and my memory. And I'm telling it now because I think it's important for people to understand that war isn't simple. It's not heroes and villains. It's people making impossible choices and living with the consequences. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The Army never found out, officially. Or if they did, they decided not to do anything about it. I received an honorable discharge, got my veterans benefits, lived a normal life. But I always wondered if somewhere in some file in some basement in Washington, there's a report about unauthorized weapon modifications in a rifle company in France and Germany in 1944 and 45. And if anyone ever reads it and connects the dots back to me. My son asked me once why I never talked about the war. This was years ago, before he understood. I told him there were things that happened that I wasn't proud of. Things that were necessary but not right. He didn't understand then. Maybe he does now. Maybe if he listens to this, he will. The truth is, I'm not proud of breaking military regulations. I'm not proud of taking the law into my own hands. But I'm also not sorry. Those 43 rifles, they mattered. They kept men alive. They gave soldiers a fighting chance when their standard issue weapons were failing them. And if I had to do it again, if I was 20 years old in that basement in St. Louis with Tommy Garcetti's blood still fresh in my memory, I'd make the same choice. That's what I've lived with for 79 years. The knowledge that I did something illegal that probably saved lives. The weight of that, the pride and the guilt all mixed together. You don't get to separate them. They're the same thing, two sides of the same coin. I think about the engineers who designed the M1 Garand. Good men, probably. Smart men. They built a fine rifle, but they built it in a factory in Massachusetts. not in a muddy field in Normandy. They tested it on shooting ranges, not in hedgerows where the rain never stopped and the mud got into everything. They didn't know what we knew, what it was like to need your weapon to work and have it fail, to hear that click instead of a bang, to watch someone die because a piece of metal broke at the wrong moment. I'm not saying I was smarter than them. I wasn't. I was just there. And being there meant I saw things they didn't see, understood problems they didn't understand. So I fixed it the only way I knew how. With my hands and my knowledge and a willingness to break rules I thought were going to get people killed. The question I've asked myself 10,000 times is, what if I'd been wrong? What if one of those modified rifles had exploded and killed the man holding it? What if the modifications had made the weapons less reliable instead of more? What if my arrogance, because that's what it was in some ways, had cost lives instead of saving them? I got lucky. That's the truth. I modified 43 rifles in the field with improvised tools, and not one of them failed catastrophically. That's not skill. That's luck, and I've never forgotten that. There's a box in my closet, has been for decades. Inside are letters from the men whose rifles I modified. 12 letters total, that's all that's left. 12 men who bothered to write to me after the war. The others either didn't care, or didn't want to remember, or died before they got the chance. I read those letters sometimes, when I'm feeling old, when I'm wondering if any of it mattered. They remind me that it did, that those men lived, that they had families, that my illegal modifications gave them a chance they might not have had otherwise. One of the letters is from a man named Kowalski. I barely knew him during the war. He was in 2nd Platoon. I'd modified his rifle in August of '44 at his squad leader's request. He wrote to me in 2003, said he'd been trying to find me for years, wanted to tell me that he'd used that rifle to hold off a German counterattack in the Hurtgen forest. His entire squad had been killed or wounded. He was alone in a foxhole with a radio, and that modified M1. He held that position for 4 hours until reinforcements arrived. Fired over 200 rounds. The rifle never jammed, not once. He said if it had been a standard M1, he'd be dead. Maybe the German counterattack would have succeeded. Maybe more men would have died. He wanted me to know that. I cried when I read that letter, because I'd never known that the rifles had mattered that much. During the war, you don't see the big picture. You just see your small piece of it, your squad, your platoon, your immediate world. I didn't know what happened to most of those rifles after I modified them. Didn't know the stories. Kowalski's letter showed me that the consequences of what I'd done reached further than I'd ever understood. But consequences cut both ways. What if someone had been hurt by my modifications? What if a rifle had failed and a soldier died because I'd weakened something or miscalculated a tolerance? I'd have to live with that too. The fact that I don't have to, that all the letters I received were grateful instead of angry, that's luck, not righteousness, not wisdom, luck. My wife died 6 years ago. Before she passed, she asked me if I had any regrets, things I wished I'd done different. I told her no, but I was lying. Not about the big things. I don't regret marrying her or having our children or the life we built, but I regret the secrets, the things I never told her, the parts of the war I kept locked away. She deserved to know who I really was, what I'd really done, but I never told her about the rifles. Never told her that her husband was a man who'd broken military law 43 times and gotten away with it. I don't know if that was protecting her or protecting myself. Maybe both. I'm telling this story now because I'm 92 years old and I won't be here much longer. And I think it's important that someone knows the truth, not the simple version, not the hero story or the villain story, the complicated truth, that I did something illegal because I thought it was necessary, that it probably saved lives, but it could have ended in disaster, that I've carried the weight of it for nearly 80 years, and I still don't know if I made the right choice. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The younger generation asks me sometimes what World War II was like. They want the glory stories, the moments of heroism, the clear victories. And there were some of those. But mostly it was confusion and fear and trying to survive. It was making decisions without enough information and living with the consequences. It was being 20 years old and having responsibilities no 20-year-old should have. It was coming home and spending the rest of your life wondering if you did the right thing. I don't know if modifying those rifles was the right thing. I know it was illegal. I know it was risky. I know it violated regulations that existed for good reasons, but I also know that men came home who might not have, that families existed who might not have, that the modifications worked when they needed to work. And I know that I'd make the same choice again if I had to, not because I'm certain it was right, because I couldn't live with myself if I'd done nothing and watched more men die like Tommy Garcetti. That's the truth I've lived with. The weight of it, the pride and the shame and the uncertainty, all mixed together into something that doesn't have a name. You carry it. You don't talk about it. You just carry it. And someday, when you're 92 years old and most of the people who knew are dead, maybe you tell the story. Not for absolution. There's no absolution for breaking the law, even if you had good reasons. Just to have it said, to have it known, to have it remembered that war is complicated and people do the best they can with what they know. The metal shavings on my fingers. That's what I remember most clearly. More than the firefights, more than the faces of the men I served with, more than the sound of the modified rifles firing. I remember sitting in that basement in St. Lo with cold steel shavings stuck to my skin, filing down a sear on an M1 Garand, knowing I was breaking the law, knowing I could be court-martialed, and doing it anyway because I was angry and scared and didn't want anyone else to die with a jammed rifle in their hands. That was 79 years ago. I can still feel those shavings sometimes, still see the candlelight reflecting off the metal, still hear the quiet scrape of the file against steel, still feel the weight of what I was doing, what it meant, what it could cost. And I did it anyway, 43 times. For 43 men who trusted me to make their weapons work when they needed them most. I don't know if that makes me a criminal or a savior, or just a scared kid who did what he thought he had to do. History doesn't have a place for stories like mine. There's no medal for illegal weapon modification, no recognition for breaking regulations even if it saved lives. There's just the quiet knowledge that I did something that mattered to the men who were there. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be. I'm 92 years old. I won't be here to see what people think of this story. Won't be here to defend my choices or explain my reasoning. This is my testimony. This is what happened. This is what I did and why I did it and what I've lived with ever since. Make of it what you will. Judge me how you need to. But know that every choice I made because I couldn't stand to watch another friend die when I thought I could prevent it. The war taught me a lot of things. It taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It taught me that brotherhood means something deeper than friendship. It taught me that sometimes you have to break rules to do what's right, and that living with that choice is harder than making it. It taught me that there's no such thing as a simple decision in combat. Every choice has consequences. Every action ripples outward in ways you can't predict or control. Most of all, it taught me that I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who was put in an impossible situation and did what he thought he had to do. The fact that it worked out is luck. The fact that I survived to tell the story is luck. The fact that none of those rifles failed catastrophically is luck, and I've never forgotten that. Never let myself believe I was some kind of genius or savior. I was just there with the skills I happened to have, and I used them the best way I knew how. There's a cemetery in Arlington where some of the men I served with are buried. I've visited a few times over the years, stood at their graves and wondered if they'd still be alive if things had gone different. If I'd modified more rifles sooner, if I'd been better at what I did, if I'd made different choices. You can drive yourself crazy with questions like that. I know because I have. For decades. Standing in the rain at a grave marker, wondering if the man underneath it died because of something I did or didn't do. But I also know that's not productive. You can't change the past. Can't bring back the dead. Can't undo your choices. All you can do is carry the weight and try to live with it. Try to be worthy of the chance you got that others didn't. Try to make sure their sacrifice meant something. That's what I've tried to do. Build a good life, raise good children, contribute something positive to the world, make the years I got count for something. I think about Tommy Garcetti sometimes, about his wife in Pittsburgh who got the telegram that her husband was dead, about the child he never met, about the life he never lived. I think about how different things might have been if I'd modified his rifle before that day in Carentan, if I'd acted sooner, if I'd been braver, if I'd cared less about regulations and more about keeping people alive. But I can't change that. Tommy died with a broken firing pin in his M1 Garand, and there's nothing I can do about it now. All I could do then was make sure it didn't happen to someone else. And I did that. Illegally. Recklessly, some might say. But I did it. And I've never regretted that part. I regret not doing it sooner, not doing it for Tommy. But I don't regret doing it at all. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. There's no moral to this story. No neat lesson, no clear answer to whether what I did was right or wrong. It was both. It was neither. It was complicated, like everything in war. I broke the law to save lives. I risked court-martial to give men a fighting chance. I carried the secret for 50 years because I didn't know how to explain it to people who weren't there. Now I'm telling it because I'm old, and the men who knew are mostly dead, and I think it's important that someone understands how complicated things really were, how the choices weren't easy, how the right thing and the legal thing weren't always the same thing, how you can do something you believe in completely and still spend the rest of your life wondering if you made a mistake. That's what I've learned in 92 years. That certainty is a luxury, that most choices are made in gray areas, that you do the best you can with what you know, and then you live with the consequences. And that sometimes the consequences are good and sometimes they're bad. And most of the time, they're both at once, and you just have to carry that. I modified 43 rifles in the summer and fall of 1944. I broke military law 43 times. I risked my freedom and my future for men I barely knew. And I'd do it again, not because I'm proud of it, not because I think I was right, because when I close my eyes, I still hear that click. That empty, hollow click of Tommy Garcetti's rifle failing when he needed it most. And I decided a long time ago that I'd rather break every regulation in the book than hear that sound again and do nothing about it. That's my story. That's what I did and why I did it. That's the weight I've carried and the secret I've kept and the choice I've lived with for 79 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding or approval. I'm just telling you what happened. What one scared 20-year-old kid did in a war that was bigger than he could comprehend, and how he's thought about it every day since. The metal shavings are gone now, washed away decades ago, but I still feel them sometimes. Still remember that night in the basement when I decided to break the rules because I thought the rules were wrong. Still remember the weight of the file in my hand, and the scrape of steel on steel, and the knowledge that what I was doing could destroy my life. And I did it anyway, because I could not do it. Because the alternative was unacceptable, because I was 20 years old and angry and scared and I thought I could make a difference. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. The men who wrote me letters thought I did. The families of men who came home thought I did. The army, if they ever knew, might disagree. History won't remember any of it. Won't remember the modified rifles or the basement in St. Lo, or the young private who thought he knew better than the regulations. It'll just remember the war, the big picture, the dates and battles and outcomes. But I'll remember. Until the day I die, I'll remember those metal shavings and those 43 rifles and the choice I made to break the law because I thought it would save lives. And I'll wonder, like I've wondered for 79 years, if I did the right thing. Not the legal thing, not the approved thing, the right thing. I don't have an answer to that. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe the question itself is the point. Maybe what matters isn't whether I was right or wrong, but that I cared enough to try. That when I saw a problem, I did something about it instead of just accepting it. That I was willing to risk everything for the men I served with, even if it meant breaking every rule I'd been taught to follow. That's who I was at 20. That's who I am at 92. A man who saw his friends dying and couldn't accept it. Who had the skills to do something about it and the nerve to try. Who broke the law and got away with it, and has spent nearly 80 years wondering if he should have. That's my legacy. Not medals or commendations, just a complicated choice and a long life spent thinking about it. I'm tired now. Tired of carrying this. Tired of wondering, tired of the weight. But I don't regret telling it. Someone needed to know. Someone needed to understand that the war wasn't simple and the choices weren't easy, and the men who fought weren't heroes or villains, but just people trying to survive and protect each other. That sometimes the right thing is the wrong thing, and the wrong thing is the right thing, and you just have to live with the contradiction. So that's my story. That's what happened in that basement in St. Lo, and the months that followed. That's the secret I kept, and the choice I made, and the weight I've carried. Do with it what you will. Remember it or forget it. Judge me or forgive me. It doesn't matter now. I did what I did, and I've lived with it, and soon I won't be here to care what anyone thinks about it. But the men who came home, they mattered. The lives that continued, they mattered. The children and grandchildren who exist because a soldier survived, they matter. And if my illegal modifications gave some of those men a chance they wouldn't have had otherwise, then maybe it was worth it. Maybe breaking the law was the right choice. Maybe I did what I was supposed to do, even if it wasn't what I was ordered to do. I'll never know for sure. No one will. But I made my choice in that basement 79 years ago, and I've lived with it ever since. And if I had to do it all over again, knowing everything I know now, I'd make the same choice. Not because I'm certain it was right, because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. That's all I have left to say. An old man's confession, a soldier's secret, a lifetime of wondering if breaking the rules was worth it. You decide. I've spent enough years deciding. Now I'm just telling the story and letting it be what it is. Complicated, messy, human, real. The metal shavings on my fingers, that's where it started. That's what I remember. And that's what I'll take with me when I'm gone. The memory of cold steel and candlelight, and the decision to break the law because I thought it would save lives. Everything else is just details.